Hello, my name is Joseph Carlson, and this is episode 200 of Gaming with Grief. But I'm calling this episode 200. I don't know what else to call it. I want to remind you guys, though, that this podcast will hit my website, www.gamingwithgrief.com, Monday morning at 7 a.m. Please go there and let me know what you think of the show. You can also subscribe to the show on either Apple iTunes, the Google Play Store, Spotify, and the audio and video now goes up day and date at 7 a.m. on Monday morning. So go there, subscribe, do what you want. You can also write to me at gwgpodfellows@gmail.com. Did I already say that? I don't know if I did. Anyway, I'm kind of nervous. This is the first time I've done video. You can also find me on Twitter at JustLittleJoe. I'm a little nervous. I haven't really done a lot of video. I've done a little bit with my friend Avin. We both do our Back and Forth, our political podcast. If you're interested in that, it's called The Grief of Politics. That hits the 20th of every month, so please subscribe to that. That's on the same channel that this is on. But yeah, this episode, I'm just calling it the 200 episode special because I can't believe I got to the 200th episode. I'm now going to do video. This won't affect the audio whatsoever. The audio is still going to go up on Apple iTunes if you want to listen to it that way. But now I'm going to do a video component that's going to be on YouTube. So usually when I do these 100 episode specials, I try to talk about why I do what I do. Because maybe you listen to the podcast between 100 episodes, obviously, or you just don't understand why I bang on about grief all the time, maybe. And so this episode might be a bit of a downer. I guess I'll give a warning to anybody who doesn't want to talk about miscarriages, death, or illness. I just want to put that out there. Some people it's difficult. I know myself, I've listened to stuff going, oh, they're going to talk about the difficult illness. Okay, well, I'm ready. Okay, I know what it's about. So, but this is basically just an overview of what I do and why I do what I do, like a thesis. Again, if I said that, I have notes. I don't really write a script. I just do notes. But really, I do what I do because I love video games. I play video games all the time. I play tons of games. If you listen to past episodes, I did a Game of the Year thing. Twice, I believe, I picked the Game of the Year winner. But I just focus on games that have to deal with death, dying, grief, disease, heartbreak, the rough stuff. Now, part of that is because, I kept playing games through 2016 to 2020 when I experienced the most amount of grief in my life, which I'll go over a timeline kind of grief in my life in a little bit. But what I realized is a lot of reviews out there, obviously, want to appeal to a general audience, whether it be on GameSpot, IGN. I like Kind of Funny's content. There's tons of people out there that I watch their content, and they want to appeal to a certain type of audience by talking about gameplay and, the narrative of the game, the characters, what it feels like to play the game. I don't care about most of that stuff because I think, just like any other form of media, games can do amazing different things. And some of those things have to do with grief and how developers tackle big subjects, not just grief. Well, some grief. Anyway, big subjects in a game, do they kind of take the unique system of storytelling that can happen in games, like environmental storytelling, stuff like that, and try to tell or use that perspective to put a unique kind of take or spin on grief. And I think some of the games that I've played do an amazing job. Go back and look at those episodes. I think, of course, that Dragon Cancer I mentioned was my Game of the Year winner last year. That's a good episode. And I also think that God of War 2018 is a big budget example of that as well. Recently these are just kind of recent examples, Gotham Knights that came out last year did not do this. And I'm not going to belabor the point, but I think it was more just using the function to tell a story about beating up bad guys, but the crux of the game is that Batman has died, and they just say some kind of trite things that you hear all the time. They don't really say anything unique about the process of grief or anything like that. So games can do good or bad, just like other forms of media, just like, movies or books. You can sometimes read a book and go, that was not good. And this isn't me gatekeeping grief, because everybody experiences a different type of grief. A different type of death, stuff in their life that means different to them. I think that if you just have a lived experience through something, things hit different. Like if you ever have experienced like cancer and you're a survivor, if there's a story about cancer in a game, you're probably going to pay a little bit more attention to it and say, I wonder what they're going to say, And you're not, I don't think, gatekeeping those things. I think what you're doing is kind of seeing if, because I think there is some universal truth or at least some kind of insight to be gained by examining things like this, just like you do in any other type of media, you know? Man, was that a good story of a dad and his son kind of growing up through the years? Yes, it was very good. I really loved it. Okay. You know, was this, it's like all that kind of stuff. And so I think that's what I try to do with the podcast, and I'll continue to do. And again, I just do this every 100 episodes, but now I'm adding videos so you can actually see my face on YouTube. I'm very bad at editing. I'm trying to get better at that, so I'll try to add inserts of like the games I play and stuff like that. And also here, I'll just talk about the structure of the podcast before I get into like the somewhat depressing stuff about the timeline of grief, as I've written up here. But the basically what happens is I have an A and a B game that I cover. I'm trying to cover longer games, but there's 2 games I usually cover. Usually the first episode in the series will be Game A and Game B together in a first impressions part, where for 10 minutes on each game, I just get into the actual logistical information of the game, not the gameplay and stuff like that, but who made it, when it came out, what platforms it's on. I try to do price if I can find that. Sometimes I'm playing a lot of stuff on Game Pass, though, so I don't really know what it's going for. I'll try to do that and be better at that, though, but that's what I try to do. So that way you know, okay, so it came out this year, you know, here's the studio that's involved. This is about how long. I use howlongtobeat.com to kind of, you know, because I have a day job, so I try to like, you know, gauge my time. You know, was it, you know, is it going to be a long game? Is it going to be a short game? Again, I'm trying to play longer games, but I have a day job, so you have to plan that. A lot of these are filmed in advance. And then what I do is I have an A and a B game and an early impressions. That's how that starts. I usually play the game for a couple hours and then, you know, record the podcast. Then the second episode in the series will be a deep dive into the themes. And also it's kind of like a question of where I think the game is going and what type of grief it will be covering, or at least the themes, like the narrative, like what I think it's talking about. I'll read a lot of stuff from Psychology Today. I love Psychology Today. I've said it many times. I probably need to give them some money somehow because I read their stuff all the time, and I think it's incredibly informative. Not only are they, you know, obviously the articles are written by psychologists, but I'll keep saying this in every podcast I use them in. Their articles are peer-reviewed by the staff who are also licensed psychologists. So that way you're getting like this really good, I don't know, mix of, you know, at least they're peer-reviewed in a way. You know, it doesn't mean they're the authority, but they're at least reviewing the articles. And I think that's a good way to kind of pinpoint, you know, hey, like I just did Space for the Unbound. I played it for a little bit and said, I wonder if this is going in the direction of compartmentalization, because this person seems to be dealing with death and loss and trying to contain that and come up with something different. And I think I was right. I think that's where I went. You know, if I got the right messages and understood the game, that's kind of like what I got out of that. And I think I was right. Sometimes I'm way wrong. I'm trying to think of an example, but I have been wrong before. I've been way wrong. The third episode in the series is the spoiler cast for Game A. So I'll be like, you know, I just did the deep dive into the themes. I was really wrong. Like, this game wasn't talking about, like, Gotham Knights. I'd hoped that they'd kind of come to this thing of, like, this is what Batman taught us, and, you know, we need to move on with his memories. But they didn't really do that. They just... I mean, I get it, it's a comic book thing, but really they just got better gear. And they said the 2 lines, which I think a lot of people who ever experienced grief are tired of hearing. You go into the virtual training room where you see a ghost of Batman train you. This is kind of like the tutorial of the game. You go into it and Batman says, let go of your grief and come with me, so-and-so, whoever you're playing, because there's 4 different characters in that game. You know, guys, if you're experiencing pain or any kind of trauma in your life, you can just stop. You just stop thinking about it. Just stop. Now, I think that's just a bad thing to say. You don't say to someone, hey, stop doing that. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. Oh, I'll stop being depressed. You know what? You're right. I'll go see the sun and I'll totally not be depressed anymore. That's not how depression works. You probably need to see a therapist, stuff like that. Those are newer examples, but that's what I'm saying. Like, when I get this podcast, I don't really go beat for beat over the, over the plot, because I've noticed doing it myself. I try to take notes, try to be very judicious, but sometimes things get muddled when you're just talking to yourself about point by point. What I try to do is kind of come up with the things where I think they excelled or they failed at in the game. Usually it's about 3 or 4 things. I think, wow, this dialogue option with this character really hit. Wow, this really hit like a nerve. Like you really know what they're going through, or you have a sense of what they're going through. Like that's usually what I try to do in the third episode of the series. The fourth episode is a deep dive into game B. So that way, okay, we've already gone over the themes of the first game. We've spoiled that. We've done the spoiler cast. That's in the rearview mirror. Now what we're going to do is do the same thing all over again with game B. And then the fifth game in this series is the spoiler cast for game B. You guessed it. Same thing. I don't pit them against each other and say one is better than the other. I just try to just treat them as separate entities. So that way, boom. That's what it is. That's what we're doing. This one did well. This one did bad. This one did bad. This one did well. Whatever. That's how it is. And then I move on. That's how the show goes. So it's usually like a 5... Hang on, let me make sure. 1, 2, yeah. It's more of a 5-episode kind of thing. But I'll also do special episodes. Like the next episode will be special. I don't really want to ruin that, but it will be special. It's more of it'll be special. But I do like deep dives into a theory. I've also done stuff about, this is called Gaming with Grief, so I've done stuff on Blizzard Activision. Please go check that episode out. I actually didn't write the episode name down. But, like when people in the news are affected by like a game company, like there was in that investigation that was brought out by the state of California, there was sexual harassment claims. Supposedly someone committed suicide. Like these are things that affect people in their normal lives. So I will go over the news. I also talked about Ubisoft. They had a lot of sexual harassment allegations against them. And I talked about those because I think it's important. It's a hobby we love. We all want it to be better, and I think people can be better. And I don't want to shy away from the bad part about, gaming. Like it does affect people's lives, especially if you work for a company where you're, you get sexually harassed when you're trying to do your job, stuff like that. Like that will affect. I mean, it definitely affects how I look at companies. I think I talked about it in that Blizzard episode, but I haven't purchased an Activision Blizzard product. Since the Blitzchung thing, since the Hearthstone, they had a Hearthstone thing anyway, that's a long story. You can look up Hearthstone, but that's pretty much, and I haven't bought any Blizzard, whatever. I haven't played any Blizzard things. In fact, Diablo 4 is coming out in a few months, and I'm not going to play it. I love Diablo 2 and 3 back in the day before all that happened. I played all the time, but I'm just not going to play it. I don't think, even if I have Game Pass, even if I download on Game Pass, it kind of feels like a weird way, like, that they're benefiting off of that. But that's for everybody to decide. If you hate what they do, but you still want to play the game, you do what you can when you can. That's kind of like what I've thought about lately of you try to do your best when you can do your best. If it's within your means, sometimes it's not. Sometimes you're like, I can't do this. I have to do this. So that's what I'm trying to do. So the next episode is a surprise. I try to record ahead. And that's what I kind of try to do is talk about why these games that talk about death, dying are important and why you should really probably not care about, hit X to pay respects. Oh, that's kind of weird. There has been a couple games that I just failed at. One, I was trying to beat it for a deadline several times and I kept playing it over the course of a week and it just kept dumping my save. So I know I usually play older games. So it's hard to, I don't really have a lot of relationships with PR or anything. So it's hard to go back to PR and say, hey, this game that's like 4 years old, my save keeps getting dumped or whatever, like what's going on. So that I probably want to actually redo that because I think I figured out a solution and it's kind of a little hit of nostalgia. It's my favorite game of all time. I want to go back. It's only like a 4.5 hour game. So maybe I'll try to go back and fix do that. That'll be cool to remedy that. The other game, I just felt like the game was very redundant and I felt like the game was actively pushing back on me when I tried to play it. Now, usually I don't talk about mechanics, but it was so egregious that it just kept coming up, and I kept trying to play the game. I'm not going to say the game it is. I don't want to throw shade on it. I did it at the time. I don't need to do it again. But, I mean, for me, that happening over and over and over, I mean, I was cursing. I mean, it was a short game, too, but, like, for hours, it was just, sometimes this is work, and a game's tough to get through. It's difficult to play because of the themes. It's somewhat depressing. For some of that, I'll tell you why I deal with that in a second. But to have a game just actively push back on you so much that like you just couldn't finish it, it was, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. So it's probably the one out of all the games that I've covered. I haven't been able to finish two. So I think that's a pretty good clear rate. What else? Oh yeah. So I just mentioned it. The other thing I do is I take breaks between games, and I do that because I've been to therapy. I don't go to therapy now. I'm thinking about going back to therapy. Anyway, I take breaks between games and I play games as a service. That's usually how I, unplug. And I know at the time everybody made fun of it, but I played Marvel's Avengers. You know why? Because when you play an incredibly heavy game like That Dragon Cancer, and the father's talking about how his 1-year-old son has brain cancer and is going to die, you watch a documentary about it, and it's gutting. And I was so, I believe it was the Green Family. Thank you so much for doing that documentary called Thank You for Playing. It's like, I think $2.99 on YouTube. If you played That Dragon Cancer, I definitely recommend checking out that documentary. But, when you go through something like that with them and watch the documentary, I think it was a 90-minute documentary, it's incredibly gutting and you need some time. So I try to record these in advance and then give myself some time to just relax. Like, I love Marvel's Avengers. The fact that I could log in as Captain America and punch a robot, so gratifying. So gratifying. Even Gotham Knights, who was not a great game, it was fun to just kind of beat up bad guys in the street digitally and just let them have it. Here's one thing I'll say for Gotham Knights that, like, no one really talks about, and it's a small thing, and this is a gameplay thing, so I just got to get this out of the way. Most games, when you do, like, a finishing move, the enemy gets up. I hate that. Because you do this really cool finishing where you're like, man, that looks so amazing, and they just stand up, and you're like, oh. Well, Gotham Knights did what I like is many of the finishing moves rounded up, so someone had tons of life, and this is what it seemed like anyway. They had tons of life. You did a finishing move on them. They were knocked out. It's almost like the game goes, that bow staff move that Robin did looked pretty cool. We're going to let it slide. And they did, and I appreciate that. So, Gotham Knights gets bagged on a lot, but that was one area that I think it did really well with. So shout out to WB Montreal for doing that, at least. Other than the game, I wasn't as impressed with, but you did that. You did something. Everybody kind of bagged on him, but I think it did all right. Okay, so here's the part of the pod that is somewhat depressing. I'm just going to go through between 2016 and 2020. I went through a lot of grief. A lot of people in my life died. I kind of sat down with my wife, and I came up with like a timeline of what happened. So, I'm going to open myself up to YouTube comments. Everybody says never read the comments, but I don't really care. I don't care about comments. I'll read the comments. I just want to do this because it's like, the Cliff Notes versions of between 2016 and 2020, I went through a lot of grief. What is that? So I wrote down a timeline to the best of my ability. A lot of this stuff happened late at night. And it happened multiple times because there was multiple deaths. And so some of the dates were a little sketchy, but my wife and I kind of sat down and tried to get the the best dates we could kind of work out. So on May 7th of 2016, my father passed away with cancer. He told me the year before he had lung cancer, but it wasn't like a normal lung cancer. He basically had a small tumor cell that started in his lung because he smoked. Apparently, some things that can happen was it'll get into your bloodstream, and it went to his brain, and the cancer infected his brain. There's probably an incredibly technical medical term for that. I don't know what it is, but I know that that's what happened to him. He had 9 cancerous lesions on his brain. They used radiation, on his brain, and they, after 9, the oncologist told me there's not really a lot we can do. So, and I was told, before he passed with the hospice doctor that a lot of the care that they were giving him was just quality of life. It had nothing to do with treating the cancer, even some of the radiation he received. So he passed away on May 7th, 2016. It's my dad, but I'm very close to my dad. I re-eulogized him actually in episode, I want to say 101 of the podcast, because I feel that right after he passed away, I was in shock. I had to write a eulogy. I did not do a good job. And so I re-eulogized him on episode 100 or 101 of Gaming with Grief. So if you want to hear me give somewhat of a proper eulogy for my father, I don't think you can ever be 100% with eulogies, but if you want to see a better eulogy, or listen, I should say, to a better eulogy because it's not a video, go there, check that out. It's episode 101. Then on, I believe it was April 29th or the 30th, my wife had a miscarriage of our first child. Emma, it was about, we already picked out a name. It was about 9 weeks. We actually had just come back. Her birthday's in late April, and we had just come back from San Francisco. We were in the Bay Area. It was beautiful. We had an amazing vacation. Obviously, she was 9 weeks pregnant, and she had a miscarriage at home. So we had to go to the hospital at 2 a.m. She had to get a DNC procedure to make sure everything was there was nothing left of our daughter, which is incredibly graphic to say, but you have to do that because my wife would get sick and she would die. So she had to go through that. We were in the hospital for a while. Everything was kind of a blur. I believe it was the end of April 2017. I mean, that's the date my wife and I kind of came up with, and I don't know how long we were in the hospital. Again, this happened very early in the morning, and you're just there until they release you, and you're having all these kind of conversations about, it is more common than you think. 20% of pregnancies end in miscarriage is what the doctor told us at the time, if I remember right. So, that was pretty terrible. It was would have been our first kid, Emma. We already picked out a name. So, I guess the next one was in July 11th in 2017. My mother passed away. She had a liver condition. She had a TIPS procedure, which is apparently where they rewire your liver because her liver was not working correctly, or maybe kidneys. Anyway, something called the TIPS procedure, and she started to have complications. And the doctor told me when we left from the procedure, I'm in Washington State. She went to University of Washington Medical Facility to get it done. I'm not blaming the doctors at all. The doctor said there's going to be a long road to recovery for this because, her body's part of the systems of her body are being reworked. We've had to have luck with this before where we redo these procedures and people start to do better. My mom went downhill very quickly, and she had to take medication and stuff like this. I don't really know what happened, but I know that the July, I think it was a week before that, so like the 3rd or 4th of July, it was right after the 4th of July. We took her to the hospital. She was very sick. I kept coming home to check on her, and she was very unresponsive. And I would try to get her to sleep. She couldn't sleep, and she would visit. And I came over to check on her one time, and she had fallen out of bed, and I couldn't get her up, and so I had to call the paramedics. And that was like on a Sunday. So like on a Sunday, we were in the hospital. You're waiting. We got a room. We're waiting. We don't know what's going to happen. Then she was kind of fidgety and sleeping. She wasn't responsive. She couldn't speak. But then a doctor came in and said, well, she looks really dehydrated. Has she drank water? I said, well, when I was around trying to make sure she was all right and checking on her, I was making sure she was drinking water, but I really don't know. So they ran a bunch of tests. That was Sunday night. Monday morning, I called. I was in Seattle working, and I called and said, here's my name. How's my mom doing? And they said, you need to come in right away and sign a DNC. So as an only child, I'm like, okay. Called my boss, went in. That was the 10th. She passed away at like 3 or 4 in the morning. On the 11th, to be honest, she was on machines. She was hooked up to many machines. And she told me years before she got sick, when my grandmother was sick, her mother, she said, my grandmother wasn't doing well, but wasn't on machines. And my grandmother said, I don't want to be on machines. And my mom emphatically said, I never want to be hooked up to a machine. I don't want to prolong anything. I never want to be in a machine. So when I wasn't sleeping that well that night because I slept in the hospital, I woke up and I saw that she was hooked to machines. I straight up asked the doctor, what would happen if you turned those machines off? And they said she'd pass away. Then I made the decision to turn the machines off because she didn't want to be hooked up to machines. And, even the nurse afterwards said, you made the right decision. There is some people who come in here that they hope against hope that that it'll all turn out all right, but that's not true. You did the right thing. And I know I did. She was in pain. She wasn't doing well, but, having to make that decision in a hospital room at like I don't know, 3 a.m. It was not good. So yeah, she passed away July 11th. January 3rd, 2018. My wife and I, we tried again to have another kid. We found out my wife was pregnant, and we named him Adam. That's my middle name, and we're gonna name him Adam William, which is my father's middle name. On January 3rd, 2018, my wife prematurely gave birth to him in the hospital. His lungs were not fully developed, and he passed away. This is the worst day of my life. He was, like I said, he was born prematurely, and his lungs were not developed. The doctor said, he doesn't have lungs, basically. They're there, they don't function. We can't really put him in an incubator. We could, but it wouldn't. It was terrible. It's the worst day of my life. When the doctor comes in and tells you that, and there's nothing you can do. You're like, this is what this is, And so my wife and I just decided to spend time with him, the time we had with him, and we had about 15 minutes with him before he passed away. So, at least there was that. We have a few photos, so at least we have that. Again, the doctor said, listen, I know this is rough. You maybe don't want to take photos, but you should take some photos, because if you have them, you have them. If you want to, you can delete them, but if you never have them, they'll never have access to them. You'll never be able to look at them. So we decided to take photos. So we took photos, and so we have some photos, and we've looked at them from time to time. So I will say, though, there was a charity out of Australia. They try to do the right thing and give you like a little care package when you leave. Like, it's for families that go through this. And they try to give you some gifts. They give you like Kleenex and stuff like that. The one that I really didn't appreciate is to give you a baby blanket. I don't want to, throw shade on them. And I understand people maybe want something to take home, like a tactile thing because of what happened to them. I kind of had the reverse thing of like, there's no kid to wrap in this baby blanket. I just want my son, So yeah, that was worst day of my life to this day. That's why if somebody writes something bad in the comments, I'm like, doesn't feel this bad. Does it feel as bad as, no, it doesn't feel that bad. Okay. Also, that was terrible, but my wife and I kept trying. We kept trying to have a kid. My wife was pregnant. Well, my mom died. But my wife, we tried again. And on March 30th, we were going to have a son. His name was Jacob. We both liked the name. He passed away at 11 weeks. So it was the same thing. I remember it was the weekend before April Fool's Day, and I was not laughing. The weird thing about if you're watching this in another country, the weird thing about the American medical system is that, you got to pay for a lot of stuff out of pocket. Healthcare is expensive. We had paid so much over these years in healthcare over the year, 2017, 2018, I think it's within a year, you basically are free and clear. There's a term for it, but basically once you meet all of your payments and deductibles and co-pays and all that, you don't have to pay anything. That's where we were with Jacob. We were in the hospital so much, we were in the clear, and I kept making the joke to the nurses, does anybody down the hall need aspirin, tissue, because I know that stuff's going to be charged for, and if you just put our name on it, we'll just give it to them, because why should they have to pay $7 for a bottle of aspirin? Just, hey, it was like going to a bar and saying, it's on us. And they didn't take us up on that. So it really didn't work out. And I think after that, we kind of decided we weren't going to try again. We were kind of crestfallen. And the last thing, we're not done yet. So on April 8th, 2019, our friend Ben passed away. I knew him since I was 18. He actually came on May 7th when my father was sick. He had glioblastoma, which is brain cancer. Again, I've known him since I was 18. He knew my family. He came when my father passed away, gave me a big hug, said, whatever I can do, I'll do whatever I can, whatever you need, I'll do it. It was I think April 8th, 2019, he passed away. So yeah, that was, it sucked because Ben was one of those people that whatever you were going to do, he was up for it. We filmed a movie years ago, him and I, he was totally keen to do it. We played D&D together. It was like, he was kind of up for anything, and he was very funny. and he loved to cook and bake and stuff. And he'd have like movie nights at his place where he'd bake, and he'd do like Low Country boils. He'd have everybody over. We'd watch a movie. Everybody was there. It was just so hilarious and everything. We loved it. You know, that was Ben, you know, and he was 40. He was like late 40s. I want to say like 47. I probably don't have his exact age, but yeah, he passed away. And it was just one of those things where my wife said, why does this keep happening? I said, I don't know. There's one more. Yeah, so on November 11th, 2020, my wife and I's cat, Annie, passed away. She's very old. We don't really know what was wrong with her. We were going to take her to the vet. We actually had an appointment that week to take her to the vet, and she passed away before, we had a chance to take her to the vet. So, yeah, that's a lot. That's what happened between 2016 and 2020. Those people in my life that I care deeply about passed away. So that is like my, that's kind of like my resume, I guess, in a weird way. And I'm not saying that to be like, I lost so much, you suck, your cat died. You don't know anything about loss. I just do that because I think people are like, why does this mean so much to you? I think, in fact, years ago when it was like the new year, Neil deGrasse Tyson is very scientific, and he wrote a tweet about, I don't understand why people are making a big deal about the Earth rotating around the sun again. And I said, because, Neil, some people we care about very deeply didn't make it around that rotation. And that's kind of what I feel about my parents did. They supported me. If I wanted to do something, especially my father, if I wanted to do something that was, I'm going to write a story, which I still write. I play D&D, you know that. He would be there for me, and he would say, okay, yeah, sure. And he'd ask me, what are you writing? What are you doing? Are you still doing this? Are you still doing that? Are you still involved in this? He was very, he was very supportive, and I want that. I want to be, supportive, and I want to see, I don't know. It's just one of those things where it's very interesting in other forms of media how people tackle grief, and that's what I want to do. I want to make sure that, not make sure. Again, I'm not gatekeeping, but I want to experience those things through someone else's gaze, because I think there is kind of a universal, there's like a truth or like a feeling to some of these things. When someone nails an emotion, I'm not just talking about grief, I'm talking about any movie. How many times have we read a book that you're just depressed because the lead character passed away or had something terrible had to happen to him? Or how many times have you walked out of a movie just bawling because the characters there touched on some emotional feeling within you, and you get, you're just with them. You're just with them the whole way. And I think games have that ability too. And I want to be there for when the games tackle things like this and just nail it. That's what I want. And I'm so looking forward to continuing the podcast. If you listen to the show at all, please share it. Please talk to your friends, family about it. I don't have a lot of subscribers and stuff, but I'm trying to get better. Again, this is episode 200. But I could always do better. There'll be better edits. Again, I'm trying to get better at editing. I'm trying to get better at all that. And I want to keep going. So I think with that, that's it for this week. But I want to remind you that this podcast will hit my website, www.gamewithgrief.com. Monday morning at 7 a.m. Please go there, leave a comment, let me know what you think of the show. If there's a game you want to review, you could drop it there in the comments because I get an alert. It's a Squarespace website, not sponsored, just saying it's a Squarespace website. You can also subscribe to the podcast in either Apple iTunes, the Google Play Store, or Spotify. And also, you can, leave me the stars, the likes, the reviews, stuff there. Again, that gets it out there, that gets it out in the ether. Maybe you can recommend it to a friend, anything like that. What else? Oh, yeah, you can write to me at gwgpodfellows@gmail.com. Please go there and let me know what you think. If you listen to an episode and you think it was really great, leave it there, please. I'm always looking forward to hearing what people say about the pod. I usually just get a like click right now on either YouTube or whatever, so that's pretty abstract. So if you want to write a comment, you can do that. You can also subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, because now, not only is the audio on Apple iTunes and stuff like that, the video of this goes up Monday morning at 7 a.m. on YouTube. So go there, subscribe to the channel, like, hit the bells, all that kind of stuff. If you like political podcasts, my friend and I, Avin Carroll, who has been on this podcast as well, we do a political podcast that comes out on the 20th of every month as well. That's on the same channel, but you don't have to watch those videos or whatever. But you can subscribe to that podcast. It's called The Grief of Politics. Go to those places. Let us know how we're doing, stuff like that. But I think with that, I'm done this week. You guys have a good week, and I will talk to you guys again next week for episode 201. I can't believe I got to 200. What am I saying? 200. So have a good week, guys. Bye.